Hey there, Wasteland Wanderers. Welcome back to another deep dive into Fallout lore. Today, we are exploring one of the darkest secrets in the entire franchise. A conspiracy that spans decades involves the most powerful corporation in pre-war America and reveals the true cause of the Great War. This is the confession of Jonathan Cross, former Vault-Tec engineer, and what he discovered will change everything you thought you knew about October 23rd, 2077. So settle in, grab some Nuka-Cola, and prepare to learn the truth. The lore begins now. My name was Jonathan Cross, former senior engineer, Vault-Tec employee number 7842, and I need you to understand something before they find me. Everything you thought you knew about the Great War, everything about October 23, 2077, it was all a lie, and I can prove it. I started working for Vault-Tec in 2068, fresh out of engineering school. Back then, I actually believed we were saving humanity. I believed the recruitment videos, the patriotic speeches, the promise of preserving civilization. For 9 years, I climbed the ranks, built vault doors, designed life support systems, helped construct the very shelters that were supposed to protect America from nuclear annihilation. But here is what kept me awake at night, long before the bombs ever fell. Here is what made me start asking questions that nobody wanted answered. We started building vaults in 2054. 2054. Think about that date. Really think about it. The Great War did not happen until October 23, 2077. That is 23 years of preparation, 2 decades of non-stop construction. We built 122 vaults across the entire country, 122 massive underground facilities, each one capable of housing 1,000 people, each one costing hundreds of billions of dollars. Now ask yourself this question: why would a private corporation spend 23 years building shelters for a war that had not happened yet? How did they know? How did Vault-Tec know with such absolute certainty that nuclear war was coming that they could justify decades of construction, trillions of dollars in investment, and the complete reorganization of their entire corporate structure around a single hypothesis? Nobody builds that way. Nobody invests that much capital based on a maybe. But here is where it gets worse. The vaults were not just shelters. I learned this slowly, piece by piece. As I gained security clearances, each vault had what they called an experimental parameter, a variable. Vault 11 was designed to force residents to sacrifice one person every year or everyone would die. Vault 27 was deliberately overcrowded with twice the sustainable population. Vault 12 had a vault door that would not seal properly, allowing radiation to leak inside. Vault 106 was set up to release psychoactive drugs through the ventilation system. These were not safety features. These were not design flaws. These were intentional experiments on human beings. And I started finding the paperwork, the original specifications, documents dated back to 2058, 2059, 2060, years before I even joined the company. The experiments were planned from the beginning, the Societal Preservation Program, they called it. Every single vault had a detailed experimental protocol written into its core design documentation. They knew exactly what they were going to do to people. They knew exactly how they were going to torture their own customers, and they had it all planned out decades in advance. But you know what really broke me? What made me realize I was working for something truly evil? It was the day I found the personnel deployment schedules. In my position, I had access to construction timelines, deployment rosters, and staff assignments. And in September 2077, 1 month before the Great War, I noticed something impossible. Vault-Tec was positioning personnel with surgical precision. Senior executives were being transferred to specific vault locations. Families of board members were being quietly relocated. Key scientists were being moved into underground facilities. And then there was the day itself. October 23, 2077, the morning everything ended. I was in Boston that day, doing final inspections on Vault 111. I remember waking up around 6 in the morning, getting coffee, reviewing my inspection checklist, normal Tuesday morning activities, But around 9 o'clock, something strange happened. My supervisor called me into the vault, told me there was an urgent issue with the cryogenic systems that needed immediate attention. This was unusual because we rarely dealt with cryosystems. That was a different department entirely. While I was inside the vault, deep in the lower levels, I saw something that did not make sense. There were Vault-Tec executives already inside, already in jumpsuits, already acting like they had been there for hours. But we had not opened the vault to residents yet. This was supposed to be a construction inspection. Why were corporate personnel already sealed inside? Then I heard it. The air raid sirens, the emergency broadcast, nuclear detonations detected in New York and Pennsylvania. Everyone in the vault started moving with practiced efficiency. No panic, no confusion. They knew exactly what to do, like they had rehearsed this exact scenario, like they were expecting it. I ran outside, had to see what was happening, and that is when I saw him, the Vault-Tec representative, the door-to-door salesman who had been working the neighborhood of Sanctuary Hills. He was there, right at the vault entrance, being turned away by soldiers in power armor, being told there was no space for him, and I recognized him because I had seen his employee file. He had been with the company for 20 years, 2 full decades of loyal service, and they left him outside to die. But here is what really made my blood run cold. As they were forcing him back, I saw the lead officer checking names against a list, a very specific list, the sole survivor and family, pre-approved, pre-selected, checked off like items on a grocery list, but the vault was not even officially open yet. How did they have pre-approved residents for a vault that was not supposed to be operational? How did they know exactly who would be coming that morning? Unless they knew when the bombs would drop, unless they knew because they planned it. I managed to get into Vault 111 before they sealed it, spent the next 2 weeks inside before I could convince them to let me out, and when I finally emerged, the world was ash. Boston was a crater, millions dead, everything I had ever known turned to radioactive dust, but I was alive. And I started digging, started investigating, started connecting pieces that Vault-Tec never wanted anyone to connect. Here is what I found. Construction logs from 2054 onward. Every single vault was built with a completion target date. And do you know what that date was? Every single construction schedule across all 122 vaults had the same projected completion deadline, 2076 to 2077, not approximate, not estimated, exact fiscal year targets, 23 years of construction, all scheduled to be complete right before the war. How do you build on that timeline unless you know exactly when you will need the buildings? You do not start a 23-year construction project with a vague hope that maybe someday it might be useful. You build that way when you have a date, when you have a plan, when you know. I found deployment orders, not suggestions, orders, dated October 1st, 2077, instructions for all essential personnel to be within 50 miles of assigned vault locations by October 15th. No exceptions, no questions asked, family members included. This was 3 weeks before the bombs fell, 3 weeks before anyone publicly knew anything was wrong, 3 weeks before the emergency broadcast systems activated. I found supply manifests, food deliveries scheduled for November 2077, medical equipment scheduled for December, maintenance supplies scheduled for January 2078, orders placed in August and September of 2077 for delivery dates after the war, after the nuclear holocaust that nobody was supposed to know was coming. Purchase orders signed by executives who somehow knew they would need these supplies in their sealed underground bunkers, even though the Great War had not happened yet. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I am about to tell you next is going to change everything you thought you knew about Vault-Tec and the day the world ended. The really damning evidence came from something most people would never think to look at: patent filings. See, when you are a massive corporation like Vault-Tec, you file patents for everything, every technology, every innovation, every piece of equipment. It is all registered, dated and stored in federal databases, and I had access to those databases through my engineering credentials. In 2061, Vault-Tec filed patents for something called a vault door emergency seal system. Standard stuff, right? Except buried in the technical specifications was a detail that did not make sense. The system was designed to detect incoming ballistic missiles and automatically seal vault doors within a 90-second window. 90 seconds. That is how long it takes for a nuclear warhead to travel from launch detection to impact on American soil. But here is the problem. In 2061, there was no integrated operational nuclear detection system. That technology did not exist yet. The military was still using primitive early warning radar. The ION system, the one that actually detected incoming missiles on October 23, was not deployed until 2074. So, why was Vault-Tec designing automated response systems for a detection network that would not exist for another 13 years? Unless they knew it was coming, unless they were planning that far ahead. I found more patents, radiation scrubbers designed specifically for post-nuclear atmospheric conditions, filed in 2063. Water purification systems calibrated for fallout contamination levels that would not be measured until after the war, filed in 2065. Air filtration rated for specific isotope combinations that could only result from a massive multi-megaton exchange, filed in 2068. Every single technology was perfectly designed for the exact conditions that would exist after October 23, 2077. Not generic disaster preparation, specific, precise engineering for the exact scenario that eventually happened. And then I found the meeting minutes. This took me years to locate, literal years of searching through abandoned Vault-Tec facilities, digging through collapsed file rooms, hacking into damaged computer systems. But I finally found them in a bunker outside of Washington. Board of Directors meetings from 2077, the final year, January 2077. Peace talks between the United States and China were progressing. The Sino-American War looked like it might actually end through diplomacy, and the meeting minutes showed something chilling. Quote, "Recent peace negotiations present significant risk to quarterly projections. Vault sales down 18%. Emergency contingency planning required." End quote. They were worried that peace would hurt their business. March 2077. Quote, "Sales projections continue downward trend. Public perception shifting toward diplomatic resolution. Board authorization requested for Project Safehouse acceleration timeline." End quote. What acceleration? What timeline? The vaults were already built. What else needed accelerating? June 2077. This one was heavily redacted. Most of the page was burned or deliberately destroyed, but I could make out fragments. Fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, competitive advantage window closing, alternative scenario planning, and then, barely legible at the bottom, proposal pending executive approval. I did not understand what that meant until I found something else, a personal correspondence file, hidden in a damaged terminal in what used to be a Vault-Tec executive office in Los Angeles, letters between board members, and one letter in particular, dated July 2077, that made everything click into place. It was from someone named Barb Howard, Senior Vice President, and she wrote, "If peace happens, we lose everything, all the vaults, all the preparation. 23 years of work becomes obsolete overnight. We need to ensure our investment pays off. We need to guarantee the outcome." Guarantee the outcome. Think about those words. What does it mean to guarantee a nuclear war? How do you ensure that billions of people die so your company can profit? There is only one way. You start it yourself. I found the evidence in the strangest place. A damaged robotics facility in the Commonwealth. Not even a Vault-Tec building technically. It was a Robco industrial site, but buried in their shipping manifests, I found something that should not exist. An order from Vault-Tec, dated September 2077, for 12,000 automated security robots. Delivery destination? Classified. Purpose? Classified. But the order note said, essential for Project Safehouse Phase final implementation. 12,000 combat robots ordered 6 weeks before the war. Not for vaults. The vaults did not need that kind of security. These were military-grade units, the kind designed for offensive operations, the kind you would use if you needed to secure launch facilities. I spent 3 months tracking that shipment, following manifests, bribing traders, searching through pre-war records, and I finally found where 600 of those robots were delivered. Fort Constantine, the military base that controlled northern strategic missile systems. The robots were delivered on October 10th, 2077, 13 days before the bombs fell, delivered by Vault-Tec to a military installation that controlled nuclear weapons. And here is what nobody talks about. Here is what got buried in all the chaos of the Great War. On October 22nd, 2077, one day before the bombs fell, there was a security incident at Fort Constantine. Military records, the fragments that survived, mention an unauthorized access event, multiple security breaches, and then at 0300 hours on October 23, 12 hours before the bombs fell, all communication from Fort Constantine went dark. Fort Constantine controlled 72 intercontinental ballistic missiles, 72 warheads aimed at China, and on the morning of October 23, somebody accessed those systems. Somebody with the codes, the clearances, and the means, and 12 hours later, the first missiles were detected heading toward the United States. But here's what the official story never mentioned. The timeline does not work. According to the DIA terminals, the ones I found in the DIA facility, the first detection was not of missiles from China. The first detection was of unidentified submersible vehicles off the coast of California at 0003 hours Eastern Standard Time. 3 submarines, location classified, origin unknown, just sitting there in the water hours before anything launched. Then, at 0913, the ION system detected incoming missiles. The assumption was China. Everyone assumed China. The United States launched a retaliatory strike at 0926, mutually assured destruction protocol. By 9:47, Boston was hit. By noon, the world was over, but nobody ever asked the obvious question. Where did those submarines come from? Chinese submarines would have been tracked. The Navy had sonar nets, surveillance systems, satellite coverage. There is no way three Chinese submarines could have positioned themselves off the California coast without being detected days or weeks in advance. The military would have known. They would have been tracking those vessels. There would have been alerts, preparations, defensive positioning, unless those submarines were not Chinese, unless they were something else. And I found evidence, buried in what was left of naval intelligence archives, that Vault-Tec had contracts with marine engineering firms, deep-sea vehicle development, submersible technology. Nothing unusual for a company building underground facilities. You need expertise in pressure systems, sealed environments, life support. All the same technology you would use for submarines. I found a purchase order from 2075. Vault-Tec buying 3 deep submergence vehicles from a defense contractor, ostensibly for vault construction transport in coastal areas. But the specifications were wrong. These were not construction vehicles. They were long-range patrol submarines, military spec, capable of carrying tactical nuclear weapons, and the order notes said they were delivered to a classified research facility off the coast of California. I know how this sounds. I know you are thinking I have been in the wasteland too long, that radiation has cooked my brain, that I am seeing conspiracies where there is only chaos. But I have the documents, I have the manifests, I have the patents and the meeting minutes and the shipping records. I have 200 years of evidence scattered across the Commonwealth, and it all points to the same impossible truth. Vault-Tec started the Great War. They dropped the first bombs. They triggered the launch detection systems. They made it look like China, and then they sat back in their perfectly prepared, perfectly timed, perfectly positioned underground bunkers while the world burned exactly according to their 23-year plan. And here is the part that keeps me awake at night, 200 years after it happened. Here is the thing I cannot stop thinking about. Mr. House, Robert House, the man who predicted the Great War. Everyone in New Vegas talks about how he almost saved the city, how he calculated the exact date the bombs would fall, how he was only off by one day. October 24th, he predicted. The bombs fell October 23. But what if he was not wrong? What if October 24th was the actual planned date? What if something happened? What if the plan changed at the last minute? What if somebody moved up the timeline and House did not get the memo? I found records of a meeting in Los Angeles, late 2077, a gathering of corporate executives, Vault-Tec, Robco, West-Tec, BigMet, Repcon Aerospace, all the major players, and House was there. Robert House himself, representing Robco. The notes are fragmentary, barely readable, but there is one line I will never forget. Implementation date requires unanimous approval. Proposal for October 24th, pending final authorization. October 24th, the exact date House predicted, the exact date he prepared for. He was not making a lucky guess. He was working from the actual plan. He knew because he was part of it. He was in the room when they decided to end the world. But something changed. Somewhere between that meeting and the actual day, the date moved up by 24 hours. And I think I know why. I think someone panicked. I think the peace talks were progressing too well. I think Vault-Tec looked at their quarterly projections and realized they were running out of time. So they moved the date up, did not tell everyone, did not get unanimous approval, just pulled the trigger one day early. And that is why the defenses of House failed. That is why New Vegas took damage. That is why 68 out of 77 warheads got through instead of being destroyed. Because he was ready for October 24th. His platinum chip was scheduled for delivery that day. His laser defense grid would have been fully operational. But they moved up the date, and he missed it by 24 hours. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores, because what I am about to tell you in the next part is going to reveal exactly how they did it and why nobody could stop them. The real proof came from somewhere I never expected. The Enclave. You have probably heard of them, shadow government, deep state, the people who supposedly controlled everything from behind the scenes. Well, they did, and Vault-Tec was their instrument. I found Enclave documentation in a bunker outside of what used to be Washington. Raven Rock, they called it. A massive military installation that survived the initial blasts. Most of it was destroyed when I found it, but the data archives were still partially intact. And buried in those archives were the original Project Safehouse authorization documents. Here is what nobody knew. Project Safehouse was not a Vault-Tec initiative. It was an Enclave operation from the very beginning. The government did not hire Vault-Tec to build shelters. The Enclave embedded itself inside Vault-Tec and used the company as a front for something much darker. The vaults were never meant to save humanity. They were meant to rebuild it. Rebuild it according to very specific parameters. The Enclave had a plan. Not to survive the nuclear war, not to preserve civilization, but to leave Earth entirely. They were building a starship, a multi-generational vessel designed to carry the best and brightest away from the planet and colonize new worlds. And the vaults? The vaults were experiments, testing grounds. Every single one designed to gather data on how human beings could survive in isolated, controlled environments for extended periods, the kind of data you would need to build a generation ship. Vault 13 was designed to stay sealed for 200 years to test long-term isolation. Vault 15 had multiple conflicting ideological groups to test social cohesion under stress. Vault 8 was a control vault to establish baseline behavioral data. Vault 11 tested obedience to authority under moral pressure. Every experiment had a purpose. Every torture had a rationale. They were studying us, studying how to break us, control us, reshape us into whatever they needed for their grand escape plan, and the timeline fits perfectly. The Enclave started planning this in the early 2050s, right as the resource wars were heating up. They looked at the world, saw it collapsing, and decided to abandon ship. But they could not just leave. They needed data. They needed to know how to keep people alive and compliant in sealed metal tubes for generations. So, they created Project Safehouse. They embedded operatives in Vault-Tec. They spent 23 years building the most elaborate human experiment in history. But here is where it gets really dark. Here is where the conspiracy becomes something worse than greed or corporate evil. The Enclave did not just want the war to happen. They needed it to happen at a specific time. Too early, and the vaults would not be ready. Too late, and the resource wars might resolve without nuclear exchange. They needed the vaults complete, the experiments prepared, and the personnel positioned. They needed October 2077. I found the evidence in a terminal, labeled Operations Timeline, Final Authorization. It was dated January 2077, and it laid out the entire endgame. Phase 1, complete all vault construction by August 2077. Phase 2, position all essential personnel by October 1st. Phase 3, initiate defensive protocols, October 15th. Phase 4, execute primary scenario, October 23rd. 0900 hours Eastern Standard Time. Execute primary scenario, not respond to scenario, not prepare for scenario. Execute. It was right there in the own documents of the Enclave. October 23rd was not a prediction, it was a scheduled operation, and here's how they did it. Remember those submarines I mentioned, the ones detected off the California coast? I found the crew manifests. They were not Chinese, they were Enclave operatives, military personnel who had been told they were part of a classified defensive operation. The submarines were equipped with Chinese-manufactured weapons, stolen, captured, or purchased through back channels over years of covert operations. The missiles they carried had Chinese serial numbers, Chinese guidance systems, Chinese everything. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Launch missiles from submarines positioned to look like Chinese attack vectors. The launches would be detected. The United States would assume Chinese first strike. Retaliation would be automatic. China would respond to the American retaliation, and within 2 hours, mutually assured destruction would do exactly what it promised. Everyone destroys everyone. The Enclave retreats to their bunkers, the vault experiments begin, and nobody ever knows the truth because everyone who could talk about it is dead. But something went wrong. I think someone in the Enclave developed a conscience. I think somebody looked at the plan and realized what they were about to do: kill billions of people, end human civilization, condemn the entire species to centuries of suffering and mutation and death, all for an experiment. All for data. I found a personal log in the Raven Rock archives, no name attached, just a date, October 22nd, 2077, one day before the bombs, and the entry said, "I cannot do this. I cannot be part of this, but if I try to stop it, they will kill me. If I go public, they will call me a traitor and execute me. If I do nothing, billions die. God forgive me. I do not know what to do." The next entry is dated October 23rd. Early morning, 0200 hours, and it just says, "It is happening today." They moved up the timeline. Someone found out about the peace talks making real progress. They are panicking. Launching 12 hours early, I tried to send warnings, I tried to alert the military, but the communication networks are already compromised. They cut me off. It is too late. In 7 hours, the world ends, and I am the only one who knows we did it to ourselves. That is why the date moved up. That is why House was caught off guard. Someone in the Enclave tried to blow the whistle, and the conspiracy leaders panicked. They accelerated the timeline, locked down communications, and triggered the submarines early. October 23rd instead of October 24th, 7 in the morning instead of noon. Everything moved up by 24 hours to get ahead of anyone who might try to stop them. And it worked. At 0913 Eastern Standard Time, the ION system detected incoming missiles. By 0926, the president ordered retaliatory strikes. By 947, Boston was burning. By noon, it was over. 2 hours. That is all it took to end the world. 2 hours from first detection to complete annihilation. I have spent decades piecing this together, decades searching through ruins, hacking terminals, following paper trails through collapsed buildings and radioactive wastelands, and every piece of evidence I find makes it worse, makes it clearer, makes it more undeniable. Vault-Tec knew the exact date. They had to. You cannot build 122 experimental facilities on a 23-year timeline without knowing when you will need them. You cannot position thousands of personnel without a concrete deadline. You cannot order supplies for post-war delivery without certainty. Everything they did, every decision they made, every dollar they spent was predicated on knowing October 23rd, 2077 would be the day the world ended. And the Enclave gave them that date, gave them the timeline, gave them the plan, because Vault-Tec was not just a defense contractor, it was the laboratory of the Enclave. The vaults were the experiments of the Enclave, and every person who walked into those shelters thinking they were being saved was actually volunteering to be a test subject in the most horrific scientific program in human history. Do you want to know the worst part? The part that makes me want to scream into the radioactive sky? It is the kids, the families, the people who bought vault spaces thinking they were protecting their loved ones. They paid for it, paid billions of dollars collectively, bought subscriptions, made down payments, signed contracts, all to secure a spot in facilities designed to torture them. Vault 11 residents had to murder one of their own every year or face total extermination. Except there was no extermination protocol. The vault was programmed to congratulate them if they ever refused to kill. The murder was the experiment. The psychological trauma was the data, and families paid money to be locked in that nightmare. Vault 106 had psychoactive drugs pumped through the ventilation. Parents watched their children descend into madness. Children watched their parents turn violent and paranoid. Everyone eventually killed each other in chemically induced psychosis, and they paid for the privilege. Vault 77 had one man and a crate of puppets, just one person, alone, for years, until he went completely insane from isolation. What kind of mind designs that experiment? What kind of person approves it? What kind of corporation sells it? I found a marketing document from 2076, Vault-Tec promotional materials, and it is the most disgusting thing I have ever read. It promises safety, security, and a brighter future, shows happy families in clean jumpsuits, eating fresh food, living in comfort while the world burns above them. Every single image is a lie. Every single promise is a betrayal, because the marketing team knew. They had to know. You cannot design promotional materials for experimental torture chambers without knowing what you are actually selling. And people bought it. Millions of people. Families saved for years to afford vault spaces. Veterans were promised spots as rewards for military service. Government officials were given priority access. Everyone thought they were the lucky ones, the survivors, the chosen, when really they were just the test subjects who paid for their own imprisonment. The Vault-Tec representative I saw that morning in Boston, the one they left outside to die, he spent 20 years selling this nightmare to people, knocking on doors, shaking hands, signing families up for experiments they would never survive. And when the day finally came, when the bombs he helped prepare for actually fell, they left him outside, told him there was no room, let him watch the world end from the wrong side of the vault door. I think about him sometimes. Wonder if he knew, wonder if somewhere in those 20 years of sales pitches and handshakes and promotional events, someone told him the truth, or if he died still believing he had been saving people. I think about all of them. The engineers who built the gas chambers into Vault 106, the programmers who coded the sacrifice protocol into Vault 11, the construction workers who installed the faulty door seal on Vault 12. Did they know? Did they understand what they were building? Or were they just following orders, cashing paychecks, going home to families who would be dead in a few years? Because that is the thing about conspiracies this big. They require thousands of people, thousands of participants who all keep the secret. And I have found evidence that most of them did not know the full picture. They knew their piece, their small part. The engineer knew the door would not seal properly, but thought it was a design flaw. The programmer knew about the sacrifice protocol, but thought it was a psychological study. The executive knew about the timeline, but thought it was a business projection. Only the people at the very top knew everything. The leadership of the Enclave, the Vault-Tec board of directors, maybe 24 people total who understood the complete plan. Everyone else was a tool, a cog in a machine designed to end the world and profit from the ashes. And now, I am the last one. Who knows? The last person alive who has pieced it all together. The Enclave is gone. Vault-Tec is defunct. The executives are dead or worse. The evidence is scattered across a radioactive wasteland that nobody bothers to explore anymore. And I am just one voice, screaming into the ruins, trying to make someone understand what really happened. I need to tell you about the Vault-Tec representative one more time, because his story is the story of everyone. It is the perfect microcosm of the entire conspiracy, and I need you to understand why. His name was Harold Gunderson. I found his employee file years ago. Started with Vault-Tec in 2057, 20 years of perfect service. Salesman of the Year in 2063, 68, and 74. Sold more vault spaces than anyone else in the Boston region. Thousands of families, thousands of people who trusted him, believed him, paid him, and on October 23rd, 2077, at 9:45 in the morning, he stood outside Vault 111 and begged for entry, showed his employee badge, reminded them of his 20 years of service, told them he had sold the spaces they were standing in, and a soldier in power armor pointed a minigun at his chest and told him to leave or be shot. Harold died 3 minutes later when the shockwave hit. I know because I saw his body afterward, saw what 200 years of ghoul transformation did to him, because he did not die in the blast. He survived, mutated, wandered the wasteland for centuries, homeless and forgotten, eventually settled in a place called Good Neighbor, lived in a hotel room, alone, still wearing the same yellow suit he had worn that morning. And you know what he told people? You know what he said when asked about Vault-Tec? He said he did not know about the experiments, said he was supposed to win a pack of steak knives for his sales numbers, said he thought he was helping people. I believe him. I believe Harold Gunderson truly thought he was saving lives. Because that is how the conspiracy worked. That is how they kept it secret for 23 years. Most people involved were like Harold, good people doing what they thought was right, following orders they believed were legitimate, serving a company they thought was heroic. Only the people at the top knew the truth. Only the executives sitting in that boardroom in Los Angeles, planning how to drop the bombs, understood what was really happening. Everyone else was a pawn, a tool, a convenient idiot who would keep the machine running without asking too many questions. But here is what breaks my heart. Here is what keeps me searching through these ruins even though I know I will never find justice. The sole survivor, the person who lived in Sanctuary Hills, who got visited by Harold that morning, who made it into Vault 111. They survived, frozen for 210 years in a cryogenic pod that was supposed to be a decontamination chamber. Woke up in 2287 to find their spouse murdered and their infant son kidnapped by people who had been using the vault for their own purposes the entire time. Vault 111 was not even a real experiment. It was a storage facility, a place to keep people on ice until the Institute needed test subjects. The entire family of the sole survivor, everyone from Sanctuary Hills who made it inside, they were all just inventory, genetic material waiting to be harvested, and the person responsible for selecting them, for putting their name on the list, for guaranteeing their spot in Vault 111, that was Harold Gunderson, the man who died outside, begging for entry. He sealed their fate thinking he was saving them. I found sales records of Harold, found the paperwork he filed for the family of the sole survivor, and there is a note at the bottom in his handwriting. Good people deserve to survive. Priority approval recommended. He actually cared, actually thought he was doing something noble. That is the real horror of this conspiracy. Not that evil people did evil things, but that good people, thousands of them, participated in the greatest atrocity in human history while thinking they were heroes. I think about Barb Howard sometimes, the woman who stood in that boardroom and said the words, "By dropping the bomb ourselves," the woman who suggested that Vault-Tec should trigger the apocalypse to guarantee their investment. Was she evil? Was she a monster? Or was she just a corporate executive who had convinced herself that the ends justified the means? That rebuilding civilization according to a perfect plan was worth killing billions to achieve. I found something in her personal files, a letter she wrote to her daughter, never sent, never delivered, dated October 20th, 2077, 3 days before the bombs, and it said, "Janie, I know you will not understand this now, but everything I am doing, every decision I am making, it is to protect you, to give you a future, to make sure that when the world ends, you are on the right side of history. I love you more than anything. Trust me." She thought she was protecting her daughter, thought she was being a good mother, even as she planned to murder billions of people, including her own husband, who she knew would not support the plan. She had compartmentalized it, rationalized it, turned genocide into a business decision and mass murder into maternal love. And maybe that is the real lesson here. Maybe the real warning is not about corporate greed or government conspiracies or shadow organizations. Maybe it is about how easy it is to convince yourself that atrocity is acceptable if you just frame it the right way. The Enclave thought they were saving humanity by gathering data to build a starship. Vault-Tec thought they were creating a better world by eliminating competition and establishing a controlled society. Barb Howard thought she was protecting her family. Harold Gunderson thought he was helping his neighbors, and the soldier who pointed a minigun at the chest of Harold thought he was following legitimate orders to preserve national security. Everyone thought they were doing the right thing. Everyone had a justification. Everyone had a reason. And collectively, they ended human civilization and condemned billions of people to death, mutation, and centuries of suffering. I am recording this confession because I need someone to know, need someone to understand. The Great War was not an accident. It was not a tragedy born of escalation or miscommunication or paranoia. It was murder, premeditated, calculated, corporate-sponsored murder on a global scale, and the people responsible got exactly what they wanted. The vaults sealed on schedule. The experiments began. The data was collected, and somewhere deep in some bunker I have not found yet, there are probably Enclave descendants still alive, still pursuing their dream of building a starship with the information gathered from centuries of human suffering, still convinced they are the heroes of this story. But you know what they did not count on? What their perfect plan did not anticipate. People are resilient. Humanity survived despite their experiments. Settlements formed. Communities rebuilt. The wasteland became home to millions of people who refused to die, refused to give up, refused to let the conspirators win. Shady Sands rose from the ashes and became a thriving city. The new California Republic formed and created actual civilization in the ruins. The Brotherhood of Steel preserved technology and protected people. Even in the Commonwealth, settlements like Diamond City and Good Neighbor proved that humanity could rebuild without the guidance of Vault-Tec or the control of the Enclave. The conspiracy failed, not because anyone stopped them, not because anyone exposed them, but because the human spirit is stronger than any plan, any experiment, any corporate scheme. We survived. We adapted. We built new lives in the radioactive ruins of the old world, and that is why I am telling you this story. Not for revenge, not for justice. Those things are impossible 200 years after the crime. I am telling you because you need to know what we survived. You need to understand the depth of the betrayal. You need to recognize that the wasteland you are living in, the mutations you are suffering, the struggles you face every day, they were not inevitable. They were chosen. Someone decided this was acceptable. Someone looked at the cost-benefit analysis and determined that your suffering was worth their profit. But we are still here. 200 years later, radiation-scarred and genetically damaged and living in ruins, we are still here, and that is the real victory. Not that we exposed the conspiracy, not that we punished the guilty, but that we survived despite everything they did to us. I do not know how much longer I have. I am old now. Even with the best medical care the wasteland can provide, I am nearing the end. The radiation is catching up. The years are taking their toll. Soon, I will just be another skeleton in another collapsed building, another forgotten victim of the Great War. But before I go, I needed to leave this record, needed to make sure someone knew the truth, even if nobody believes it, even if you think I am just another crazy wasteland prophet seeing conspiracies in the rubble. The evidence exists. The documents are real. The timeline proves it. Vault-Tec knew. The Enclave planned it. And on October 23rd, 2077, they murdered the world. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video. My name is Jonathan Cross, former Vault-Tec engineer, employee number 7842, and I am the last person who knows what really happened. When I am gone, the truth dies with me. Unless you remember, unless you tell others, unless you refuse to let them erase what they did. The wasteland is our home now, has been for 2 centuries, but it did not have to be this way. We could have had peace, could have survived the resource wars through diplomacy and cooperation, could have preserved civilization without nuclear fire. Instead, we got Vault-Tec, we got the Enclave, we got executives in boardrooms deciding that billions of lives were acceptable losses in pursuit of profit and power and their twisted vision of a perfect future. But we also got something they never expected. We got survivors who refused to play by their rules. We got communities that rebuilt without their permission. We got a new world rising from the ashes of the old, shaped not by corporate plans or government conspiracies, but by ordinary people doing extraordinary things just to stay alive. And maybe that is the real ending to this story. Not that the conspiracy succeeded, not that they got away with it, but that despite their best efforts, despite their perfect plans and their 23 years of preparation and their carefully designed experiments, humanity survived, changed, adapted, overcame. They wanted to control the future. Instead, they created a future they could never predict. A wasteland that does not follow anyone's plans, a world where vault dwellers and raiders and settlers and ghouls all struggle together to build something new. That is not the future Vault-Tec wanted. That is not the society the Enclave tried to engineer. That is something else entirely, something messy and chaotic and beautiful in its own broken way. So remember this story. Remember October 23rd, 2077. Remember that it was not China, was not Russia, was not an accident or a miscalculation or a tragic inevitability. It was murder, and we survived it. That is the truth. That is the confession. That is the legacy of the Great War. They tried to end the world on their terms. We refused to let it end at all. Recordings are hidden throughout the Commonwealth, in terminals, in holotapes, in written documents sealed in waterproof containers. If you are hearing this, you found one of them. There are others. Keep looking. Keep searching. The full truth is out there, scattered across the wasteland, waiting for someone to piece it together. I am done running, done hiding, done searching, but you can continue. You can find the rest. You can expose what really happened. You can make sure the next generation knows that the wasteland was not destiny. It was a choice made by people in suits, sitting in comfortable offices, deciding that the lives of your grandparents were worth less than their quarterly profits. Never forget that. Never let them erase it. Never let anyone tell you the Great War was inevitable. This is Jonathan Cross signing off. The truth is yours now. What you do with it is up to you. Good luck out there, survivor. You are going to need it.